This is The Payoff with me, Sylvia Jeffreys, thanks to Belong Internet and UniSuper. Prime Minister, welcome to The Payoff.
Good to be with you.
Very official, isn't it?
It is indeed.
It's official, but it's unofficial because we're sort of in an unofficial campaign as we record this today. Give us a sense, you haven't yet called the election, but we know it's not far away. Give us a sense of what this morning looked like. It's, 2:45 as we record today. What did the rest of today look like so far?
Got up pretty early and then went to...
What's pretty early?
I'm not sure what time it was, about 5:30. Then went through some of the media, got up, got ready in Canberra, made myself a little bit of brekkie and coffee, read the papers, then headed off to the airport. Was on a plane about 7:30ish, then arrived in Sydney Airport, drove to Carlton, did an announcement, big announcement, $4.8 billion additional for New South Wales public schools over the next 10 years. So a deal with Chris Minns as the Premier and Jason Clare, our Minister for Education, Prue Carr, the New South Wales Minister. So we did that. That was terrific. It's always great being in a classroom as well with little kids, and they were learning phonics, so that was quite good. It's a deal for additional funding, but it's tied to better learning in numeracy and literacy, phonics, doing teaching, examining at year one so that we don't allow kids to fall behind. So that was really good, positive announcement. And then I headed to Kirribilli for a short while, went out to southwest Sydney. I've been at Cabramatta with Tu Lee, our candidate there, meeting with community leaders. Then I've come here. After this, I have some meetings this afternoon. Then later today, I'll head up to Brisbane. I have a meeting with the Premier, David Crisafulli, later tonight as well, and that's in prep for tomorrow. I'll go to the emergency headquarters there with the Queensland Premier, looking at, quite nervously, I've got to say, looking at the weather predictions as this cyclone potentially crosses onto land either in southeast Queensland or northern New South Wales.
Well, it's remarkable. We'll talk about this later, but it is remarkable to think that we're looking at a Category 2 system potentially at this stage as we record, crossing the coast near Brisbane or northern New South Wales. In my career, 20 years in news and working in Queensland for a really long time, I've never heard of anything like that. So we'll discuss that a little bit later, but I'd like to begin by asking a question that I started with Peter Dutton last week when I spoke to him. What is one piece of policy, what is one change you will make, if re-elected as Prime Minister, that will have an immediate effect on the lives of young Australians?
Getting rid of 20% of HECS debt immediately will help some 3 million Australians, largely young ones, to immediately eliminate 20% of the HECS debt. We did $3 billion of changes this year, which we legislated. What this will do is mean an additional $5,500 benefit for those 3 million Australians, and that will be immediate.
You've also announced some changes in terms of how HECS debts are factored into mortgage applications as well. How will that work?
That's right. What we've done is make changes to APRA, the Prudential Regulatory Authority, to suggest to the banks basically that they're not taking into account HECS debt, because that was really stopping young people entering the housing market when they were taking that into account.
So who will that apply to? Is it anyone with a HECS debt?
Yeah, that applies across the board. It's basically saying to the banks, be fair here. You shouldn't be taking this into account, because that's very much a long-term issue. It's not someone's immediate financial position that they're in.
We know a lot about your childhood, of course, on a personal level, growing up in Housing Commission with your mother. I'm interested, for the sake of this podcast, in 25-year-old Anthony Albanese. What were you like with money back then? And do you think you would be coping in this current economic climate?
I've always been pretty frugal, I've got to say, and that was in part I guess the best way to tell the story is when my dear mum departed at age 65, she was spent. She was ahead in her rent in what was a housing department place that was city council originally, but that she was born in and died in, lived her whole life in that one home. Her Myers card was in credit. They owed her money. So she didn't have anything in the bank ever, but she was always, every fortnight, she put away money. So she would go to the post office in those days. For younger people will wonder, what is this? You could buy stamps, for example, and put them in a book for the telephone, and then when your bill came in, you would take that amount off. You'd hand over your book and that would come off your bill. So she was very good with finances. I've inherited some of that. I've never paid any money. I'm a bank's worst nightmare in that I've never paid any interest on a credit card, for example. Or I've paid it off my whole life, whether it's at 25 or 18 or now. So I think, though, that circumstances have changed. I went into buying a home in Marrickville when I was 25 or 26. At that time, interest rates, though, were pretty close to, I think it was 19.5%, my first mortgage. So whilst it was a lot cheaper, the home, the interest rates were much higher, certainly, than they are today. And my mother, because she'd lived in that home her whole life, she used to speak about dead rent. So she encouraged me to buy my own home when I was in a position of working full-time and able to do so.
Well, as you point out, it's a very different landscape today. And,
it sure is.
Young people or a first home buyer, they're looking at spending 10, 11, 12 times the average salary, on their first home, which just makes it feel out of reach for so many first home buyers. So what are you promising to do for first home buyers to help them get a leg up, a foot on the property ladder?
Yeah, it is much harder to get into the property market now. I know Jodie, my fiancée, had never owned a house, but rented her whole life. And that's the case for many Australians now. So we have a multifaceted approach. The key to housing affordability is supply. But we also, in order to help people get into home ownership, we have our Help to Buy scheme that was held up in the Senate, but eventually it got passed in December. What that is a shared equity scheme. So for a new home, a new dwelling, that can represent 40%, up to 40% of the value of a property. So if it is, $500,000, then that's $200,000 can be owned by the government effectively, and you can choose to pay out some of that equity as you're able to do so down the track, or when a property is sold, if none of that share of the property has been paid down, then the government of the day gets 40% of the value. So it's a way of getting people into that home ownership, and therefore you only need as well a 2% deposit. It's been really successful in Western Australia, has got hundreds of thousands of people in a home ownership since the 1970s. It's worked effectively in New Zealand, in the United Kingdom, a range of constituencies around the world. And so we thought that was one element that can get people into home ownership. There's additional other programs through Housing Australia with a 5% deposit. That's provided assistance as well for around about 200,000 Australians to get into home ownership. So we've got home ownership. We have, when it comes to rentals, we have our build to rent scheme. Again, that was only just passed in December, but the Properties Council and other bodies suggest that that will lead to hundreds of thousands of extra dwellings being built for affordable rentals, and that will make a difference to supply. And of course, we've increased rental assistance by 45% in the last two budgets, but as well we have increased funding for social housing as well. Our Housing Australia Future Fund is $10 billion.
So the Housing Australia Future Fund, the goal is what, 1.2 million homes?
The goal is 1.2 million new homes to be built across a range of, not just through the Housing Australia Future Fund, but we have an incentive, $3 billion for states and territories to meet their targets. So that's about planning. The Commonwealth has limited control over state and local government planning. So this is about providing that incentive for state government, such as the one here in New South Wales is certainly taking it up under Chris Minns. So even in my own constituency, there is a site at Camperdown, very close to where I grew up, literally in the next block, which is where the WestConnex Road project tunnelling occurred. They're going to build houses there, around about 500 dwellings. In Marrickville, some 1,200 dwellings on a site near Wicks Park as well. That's about increasing density, appropriate density in my view, around public transport routes, and that will be important. Victoria has designated around railway stations through the Suburban Rail Loop Authority, has taken over planning over local government so that you actually get that higher density above stations and around stations as well, which is what we need. We can't just spread out further and further where there isn't that social and community infrastructure as well.
So when it comes to housing, supply is clearly one of the main issues that is the problem here, right? So everyone wants an ambitious target, and an ambitious target is what is required in Australia when it comes to supporting home ownership, but also renting as well. So 1.2 million homes, I mean, that's aspirational, but when you consider the role of councils and state governments and federal government involved, I mean, it feels like mission impossible.
Well, if you don't have a target, you certainly won't be trying to get there. And what this does is provide as well a financial incentive, like the Hawke and Keating governments had on competition policy, to say, okay, state government and local government, here's the incentive. We can't control planning laws at the Commonwealth level. What we can do is to provide that incentive which is there. But we also have our fund for housing infrastructure to assist that as well. So if a dwellings or an estate can be built but needs electricity connected or water connected, any of those things, we've now had 2 rounds of funding for that, and that has been incredibly successful. It's been oversubscribed by local government and by state governments who are saying we could build houses here, but we need that infrastructure. It might be that it needs a road connected, but providing that funding is really important as well.
Things like negative gearing and the capital gains discount, they are elements of the tax system which many would suggest have allowed homeowners to own more homes and to own a larger stake of the property market. Are you willing to look at those elements of tax reform?
The problem with the suggestion that if you just get rid of negative gearing, then it'll solve the problem, is that it doesn't take into account the fact that that could be a disincentive to actually build more properties as well. That in terms of supply, it's hard to see how changes there will boost supply. There's an equity issue to it, but it's not really about supply. So if you recognise, as I do, that housing supply is the key to making a difference here, how do we build more homes, then anything that's not about that is, in my view, very much a secondary issue. So what we've done is address what we regard the real issues are, and the first, second and third order issue is that housing supply.
Okay, let's talk energy. And there are a lot of topics we could cover off. We're not going to get to all of them today, of course, but I want to do my best today to explore the issues which I think are really weighing on young people. Energy bills, of course, is one of them, factors into the cost of living on the whole as well. First of all, will you extend the energy rebates if you're re-elected?
Well, we'll make announcements in our budget process, but we've had 2 lots of energy rebates. We also took what was unprecedented action of having an intervention into the market to cap coal and gas prices effectively. If you had said to me we would do that in 2022 election, I would have said, gee, that's a pretty radical proposition. But we did it in partnership with the Perrottet Liberal government here in New South Wales and the Palaszczuk Labor government in Queensland. Both sides have swapped now. But that was a major intervention into the market because of the extraordinary impact that the Russian invasion on Ukraine had, and that flow through to energy prices and spiked global inflation. And we're also dealing with the sort of tail end as well of the COVID pandemic that we're still dealing with. But we intervened. I think it was the right thing to put in place those energy rebates. The current one is $300 paid in 4 quarterly amounts. That's also had an impact on reducing inflation, which is a good thing. We will make announcements at an appropriate time.
That sounds like it's coming then.
Well, we'll make announcements at an appropriate time.
Okay.
Not here
Okay.
to announce our budget
enough.
quite yet.
I'm not sure I'd like to digest that all on my own anyway. So
that's due in just a few weeks.
Fair enough.
Our budget, but they were opposed by Peter Dutton and the coalition. I think they made a difference. And certainly state governments join in as well. Some of the state governments had very large rebates on top of that. So in Queensland, I think it was $1,000. So that's made a difference for people.
At the last election, of course, you famously promised to bring power bills down. As you point out, there have been many factors, including global ones, that have played out over the last few years. But would you be willing to make the same promise heading into this election, that you can bring down the average power bill?
Well, what we said was that renewables were the cheapest form of new energy, and Reputex did modelling which showed the impact that renewables, as opposed to a business as usual approach, would have. And for the same reason why so many Australians, more per capita than any country in the world, have put solar panels on their roofs. It helps the planet, it brings down emissions, but importantly, it brings down their power bills. That same logic applies across the economy as well. So we have now approved enough renewable energy projects to power 8 million homes. We are getting on with the transition, which will, compared with business as usual, reduce costs of energy, and certainly compared with Peter Dutton's $600 billion nuclear energy plan sometime in the 2040s that'll be funded by taxpayers. That will also, importantly, undermine investment that's happening right now. Business wants that certainty. And that's why when we announced our energy policy with the 43% cut by 2030, 82% renewables as part of the grid by 2030 as well. It's now up above 40%. And it was supported by the Business Council of Australia, Australian Industry Group, Australian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, as well as the Australian Conservation Foundation, the Australian Council of Trade Unions, because we know that renewables are the cheapest form of new energy.
Look, energy, renewables, nuclear, all of it is incredibly complicated, right? It takes a really deep level of understanding to really get your head around how it works and what's best for our country. But at the end of the day, a lot of people listening to this will be wondering, why we struggle with high electricity bills, why we worry about capacity on a really hot day in Australia when everyone's got the aircon on. When we live in a country that is so resource rich, it just doesn't add up.
Sure. Well, when it comes to reliability, the problem is that coal-fired power stations are reaching the end of their life. They are unreliable and they break down and go off grid. That's the fact of the matter. That's why we can't afford to say just stop with new energy, with renewables and gas and storage, and just wait. Keep the coal-fired power stations going. They are at the end of their life. I sat in Parliament for 9 years of the former government saying that the Liddell power station would keep going, and they just stopped talking about it. They announced the timeline and then it closed on their watch. More than half of the coal-fired power stations around Australia announced their closure while the former government was in office. In Western Australia, the last coal-fired power station in Collie will shut in 2027. Like, the transition is happening. They are reaching their end of their life. They didn't get reinvestment of capital because it doesn't make sense. There's no ban on building a new coal-fired power station. It's just that no one will finance it because it doesn't stack up. And that's the same reason why there's no private sector financing for nuclear energy. If it stacked up, someone would be putting their hand up and saying, yep, we can make money out of this, we're going to invest. But Peter Dutton has had to say, no, the government, and usually for the Liberal Party, the party that speaks about markets, the government are going to build and own and run these 7 nuclear power plants, ignoring the ban that's there in places like Queensland that the LNP have said they're not going to change, ignoring that some of them are located, like the one up at Liddell in the Hunter Valley in what's essentially an earthquake zone, not the smartest idea that anyone's ever come up with, and ignoring the fact that in other places the sites have already been taken over by other activity that's happening, be it renewables with storage or other manufacturing capacity on those sites. So it really, at the next election, is part of the decision that Australians will have to make, is do we keep going in investing in renewables backed by gas and backed by storage capacity, or do we stop all of that, pretend that I'm not quite sure what the solution is for storage or for capacity of the system in the 2030s while these things are being built by taxpayers, but just put all that on hold to the 2040s. It doesn't make sense. There's no energy expert in the country that is saying that it makes sense, which is why all of the operators are saying as well, we shouldn't go down the track of the most expensive form of new energy that there is, which is nuclear energy.
Look, a few years ago, climate change would have rated really highly, I think, among young voters when they were heading to the polls in terms of the issues that were most important to them. In a time of economic stress, things like climate change may slip down that list because people are immediately focused on how they're going to pay their bills, how they might feed their children, how they're going to afford the school fees and everything else in between. Are you concerned that climate change is slipping down that list of priorities right now?
We were talking at the beginning of this discussion about cyclones potentially hitting northern New South Wales. This is a tropical cyclone hitting, potentially crossing the land border at Brisbane or northern New South Wales. Now, that's not business as usual.
No.
And whilst we have always had extreme weather events, we've always had floods, we've had cyclones, we've had bushfires in this country, they are more intense and more frequent now is what we are dealing with. I was dealing with flooding up in North Queensland just weeks ago around Ingham and around the Townsville area. I've been to every state and territory with natural disasters since I've been Prime Minister in under 3 years. And we're facing a very nervous few days ahead as well. So I think people are concerned about climate change. It will be an issue during the election campaign. My government takes climate change seriously. And it's also, there are other aspects to it as well. The key to credibility globally as well, like in our Pacific with our neighbours, is to take climate change seriously. And that was a source of tension between the Morrison government and our Pacific neighbours. Our Pacific neighbours are very conscious about Peter Dutton making a joke about water lapping at people's doors in the Pacific. They all remember it, and that doesn't augur well for any potential relationship which might be there in the future.
Sick of paying megabucks for your internet? Switching could help you. So switch to Belong Internet. They're backed by Telstra, they have a reliable network, and with internet plans with prices that aren't too spicy. Plus, you can change plans once a month and you're not locked in. For zippy internet at nifty prices, search Belong Internet. It feels good to belong. Okay, let's look a little more globally and perhaps dive into the topic of Donald Trump. We all saw, of course, the extraordinary blow up in the White House with Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelensky. I mean, that was really hard to digest, that scene. It was really difficult to watch, jaw-dropping and astounding all at the same time. And it, I think, reiterates for a lot of people that we live in really unsettling and unusual times right now. The US, we know, is a critical ally to Australia. Today, as we record, Donald Trump has, by the way, just paused military aid to Ukraine. He has committed to going ahead with tariffs on Canada and Mexico. That doesn't bode well for us in Australia, with threats of tariffs for our aluminium and steel as well. So can you still, hand on heart, say that we can rely on America to come to our aid if we need them?
There are different positions that I have from President Trump. That is there, but it doesn't mean that you can't work through issues in the national interest, in our respective national interests. And I think when it comes to issues like tariffs, it is in the United States' interest. The US has a positive economic trade relationship with Australia. That is, they sell us more than we sell them. So if trade between our two countries was to stop immediately, then the US would be hurt more by that than Australia. But we'll work through those issues. I support free and fair trade as a principle as well. Tariffs are something that are paid for by consumers. They will lift costs in the United States. We have good goods. We don't sell our aluminium or our meat products or other steel, other products to the US as a charity, and they don't buy them as a charity or a favour. It's done because it makes economic sense for both of us, and I think that will continue in the future. They will make their decisions, though, quite clearly. They will make decisions based upon their assessments. Our job will be to respond to that appropriately, to always be considered and orderly in our international relations. And I'll always stand up for Australia's national interests. When it comes to Ukraine, we have an interest in supporting Ukraine, and I believe that the democratic world does as well. You don't have to, in my view, think very hard about which side you're on over whether you're on Vladimir Putin, an authoritarian leader who has imperialistic designs not just on Ukraine but on the region, or Vladimir Zelensky, who's standing up for his country's national sovereignty. He is leading a country that has shown incredible bravery and are going through incredible hardship, and I believe they deserve our support.
Look, it's very difficult territory that you have to tread in as Prime Minister when it comes to international relations, and it is much easier for Peter Dutton, for example, to throw stones from opposition. But I think there is definitely a sense in Australia that there is a concern about our relationship with America and if we are going to be left high and dry.
Well, we can, of course, stand on our own feet and be resilient as well. So where we disagree with policy or a direction put forward by President Trump, then we'll say so and we'll maintain Australia's position. And that is what I've done on Ukraine, but we'll do so respectfully, diplomatically, which is how we deal with international relations. So it is a major part of the repair job that my government have had to do. Is not just in policy terms, in the mess we had in migration, in aged care that was in crisis, childcare that didn't have enough workers, in the health system where primary health care was underfunded, bulk billing was in free fall. One of the other areas that we had to deal with was the way that we govern ourselves and the way we relate to other nations. Now, the ordinary process of government had broken down under Scott Morrison. That was demonstrated by the revelations after the election that he'd appointed himself as Prime Minister, Treasurer, Health Minister, Energy Minister, Industry Minister, without even people knowing. I mean, it was extraordinary dysfunction. The Cabinet didn't operate properly. Decisions weren't made correctly. There were a whole lot of programs that just funding would have dropped off the perch on June 30 after we were elected. But also international relations. Our relationship with France was diabolical, to say the least. The relationship with China, our major trading partner, had led to the impediments were there for trade between us. There'd been not a single discussion over the previous 3 years. We were pariahs in the Pacific. You had the Solomon Islands doing a deal with China. You had, at the Pacific Island Forum, Australia essentially regarded very badly with our near neighbours. The relationship with ASEAN was not positive either. And the relationship with the United States, they were not happy because of what they were told during the AUKUS negotiations as well, that France was all okay with that. So France not only withdrew their ambassador from Australia, but withdrew their ambassador from the United States, which, given the historic relationship there, was pretty extraordinary. We've had to repair all of that. And Peter Dutton and the coalition can be as belligerent as they like, but there's a price to pay for that. What we need is orderly, respectful discussions with all of our international relations. Australia's standing is far higher with our friends than it was in 2022. That's just a fact. And part of that is policy, of course, in climate change, but part of that as well is the way that we've dealt with them.
Okay, I want to get honest. Heading into this election, you are up against it. Looking at the polls, it's not good for you. It's not good for Labor at this stage. There has been a huge drop-off in the polls in terms of support. So 2022, at the end of that year, you were sitting at plus 34 in your approval rating. Today, you're somewhere around minus 17. I wonder if you get the sense that that guy back in 2022 that everyone wanted to have a beer with in Newtown and talk about the bunnies with, have you lost your Albo effect? Has Albo lost his mojo?
Not at all. I'm the same person I was then, and that I always will be.
So where do you think you've gone wrong, though, to drop to minus 17?
If you have a look at figures around the world, this is a difficult time to be in government. That's just a fact. That has happened, whether it be Keir Starmer in the UK, Christopher Luxon across the ditch. But we've got a good story to tell. More importantly, we've got a good agenda to fulfil. We've laid the foundations during this first term. I always said that you needed to be in government for more than one term. But this term, when we go before the Australian people, sometime in the coming period, we will be able to say we've got inflation down, wages up, 1.15 million people more employed, more than any government in history. We have produced 2 budget surpluses. We've given every Australian a tax cut. We've produced a range of cost of living measures that were all opposed by the coalition. We have put in place major reform of aged care, of childcare, of school funding, of health care, including fixing Medicare going forward. Our international relations are much better than what we inherited. We're taking seriously the challenge but also the opportunities of climate change. We will have a positive agenda, and we understand that because of cost of living pressures, this has been a difficult time to be in government, but we have worked hard each and every day. The former government didn't produce any budget surpluses, didn't oppose, as the opposition have opposed all of our cost of living measures. They opposed the tax cuts for every taxpayer. They opposed the changes that we've made to student debt. They've opposed our childcare reforms that are helping families. They regarded gender equality as something that was, a triviality. We regard it as essential. So the gender pay gap is at a record low. Paid parental leave of 6 months. We've made domestic and family violence leave of 10 days a part of the agenda. We produced the Australia's most significant ever women's reproductive health policy just a few weeks ago that we're rolling out. All of these measures make a difference to people. We will put forward that positive agenda during the election campaign, and I'm confident that when people look at our policies and the alternative, which has essentially only really put out 3 policies. They've got a $600 billion nuclear energy plan. They've got free lunches that every taxpayer will pay for, but most won't get to go on. And they've got cuts that they won't tell you what they are.
Very generous
until
of you to
after the
platform their
election.
policies.
That's it. Well, that's all they've got.
So when you look at the polls, though, when you consider some of those achievements and some of those policies, the women's health one, for example, which would no doubt be very popular with young female voters when you look at the support for endometriosis care, for IUDs, for contraception, all of that. You must look at the polls and wonder why you haven't been able to cut through with an approval rating of minus 17. So I wonder if there's anything you would have done differently, perhaps, in this first term of government.
Oh, look, I'm human. And you could always do things differently, of course, if you had the opportunity to relive life. But what I've done is to work hard each and every day. I know that we've made a difference each and every day as well. We haven't sat back and said, this is too hard. We've dealt with the most difficult global circumstances since the GFC when it comes to the economy. When that hit in 2008-9. We've done so in a way unlike other countries that have hit double-digit unemployment or double-digit inflation, that have seen New Zealand next door is in recession, a deep recession. We didn't do that. We've actually landed with a task that's like landing, a 747 on a helicopter pad. That's how difficult it is to get inflation down whilst providing that cost of living support. But we have turned the corner, and things are looking much more positive than when we came to government, where inflation was 6% and rising, interest rates had begun to rise. Now they've begun to fall. That is a sign of the improvements that we have made in the economy, and we've done that whilst providing for that space in social policy when it comes to gender equity issues, and they're just some of what we have done. We've done it as well in terms of our environmental policy and programs that we're rolling out there, everything from Urban Rivers program to better oceans policy to protecting our urban and natural environment and dealing with the challenge and opportunities of climate change. We've done all that. So we will pursue our case very strongly, and it will be an option. And it won't be an option between perfection and a political party. It will be an option between Labor and our agenda, our positive agenda of a better future for Australia. And Peter Dutton and his negative campaign, except for those three policies that I don't think stack up.
Before coming to meet you here today, I was reflecting, I hope you don't mind me bringing this up, on a meal that you and I had together in Melbourne once.
Yeah.
We were both there for the Today Show, and Carl and Dickie had stood us up, which is, that tracks.
Yeah. As they would.
Very on brand for them. And I got a little insight, I think, into you as a person and what makes you tick. And I often reflect on how lovingly you spoke of your son Nathan and how your face lit up when you spoke of him, how proud you were of him. And I wonder, heading into this election, when young people really hold the key to your re-election, Gen Z millennials, they will be out in greater numbers than baby boomers for the first time. So they're going to be very influential at the polling booth. I wonder if you use Nathan as a gauge on young people, and do you seek his advice on what young voters are thinking and feeling?
I get his advice whether I seek it or not.
Perfect.
If I could say that. He's a smart young man, and he's now 24. So that would have been. He
was still in school. I think.
That was quite a few years ago. Yeah. Now it's a very lovely dinner, by the way.
It was, yeah.
And he's a lovely young man. He has a fantastic relationship with his partner, and we talk every day on the phone. And he gives me his views on things. He chooses, I think, quite rightly to not be in the spotlight publicly
Fair
at
enough.
all, which is absolutely fair enough. And, he's not on any public social media or anything else. But he's someone who does keep me in touch. It's quite handy, I've got to say. We educate each other about music. And
what's he taught you about lately?
Oh, gee, he teaches me about a range of bands that he will like and that are new. He has told me he was with me for my birthday on Sunday, and he was going to see a band last night. I'm not sure who it was. It was a band I hadn't heard of, but it's quite handy getting him to. He always buys me albums, vinyl that are bands that I'm not aware of. And he's got pretty good taste, I've got to say, as well. But he also talks about, the challenge which is there of financial pressures which are on. He's someone who, of course, has a HECS debt, like a whole lot of young people. And the issues him and his group of friends as well. He's very lucky in that he has had a group of friends who went to Dully Public School from the early years, and they went right through 3 lots of school to Leichhardt Secondary college and then to Blackwattle campus, and they're still mates. His uni experience wasn't great, like a lot of young people, very conscious of it, because he was at the University of Technology in Sydney. For 2 years, he didn't go on a campus because of COVID, and that's been a difficulty, I think, that young people have had to go through. But he's always worked as well. He worked his way through school and uni at Woolies as a checkout person and stacking shelves and doing all of that. And he finished his degree in business and now he's working.
So if you don't get re-elected, if you don't win this election...
I'm focused on winning.
But if you don't, do all roads lead to Copacabana?
I'm focused on winning.
Not even willing to contemplate retirement at this point?
I'm very much focused on winning, and I think that the country needs some continuity in government. You know, I don't want to go back to where Australia was. And you look at the people who've been pre-selected, you know, it's like the LNP in Queensland are incapable of selecting anyone except, you know, half the population who happen to be men. You got Karen Andrews being replaced. And one of the things I'm really proud of is my government look more and more like what the Australian population looks like, which is, you know, we're just a majority of women. Our cabinet is 11 women, 11 men in the cabinet that I chair. And that makes a difference when it comes to policy, not just in gender, but in other areas as well. People of different faiths, people of different ethnicity and backgrounds are much more representative of the Australian people. And I think that does matter. It does have an impact on policy because when you've got people there who bring their life experience to the table, that's really important.
Before I let you go, and you've been very generous giving us this time today, I know you've got a plane to catch up to Queensland. You know, things are challenging in Australia right now. They are particularly challenging for young Australians. Why do you deserve a second chance from young Australians when they head to the voting booths whenever that election plays out?
Because we've got your back. We understand that things are difficult today, but we also understand that it is in young people's interest, by definition, more so than myself, who won't be around in 50 years, that we always navigate what have been turbulent seas, but with our eye on the horizon. How do we make Australia stronger, not just in 3-year terms are far too short. What does Australia look like in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years' time? That means taking climate change seriously. That means training Australians for the jobs of the future. That means addressing housing supply. That means valuing every Australian for who they are, regardless of their gender, their ethnicity, their sexuality, all of those issues, their faith, or whether they don't have any religious views. That is something that I think is absolutely critical, and something that my government always seeks to do, to have in mind not just, the next poll that you asked about. At the end of the day, no one remembers what a poll is 2 weeks later. What people remember is whether a government has made a difference for people, whether it's been positive or not. And it is only Labor that make the big reforms. Whether you look at universal health care, you look at universal superannuation, you look at the changes that have been made in education, the action on climate change, engaging with the world, it is Labor that make the big reforms that last. I want to make universal childcare to add that to universal superannuation and universal Medicare. And I want to make sure as well that young people get a fair crack at work. That's what we haven't spoken about today, but things like the right to disconnect, the proper definition of casualisation, same job, same pay. So
the right to work from home.
People don't come in. And the right to work from home where it's appropriate. You have this easy translation from American politics. It's like immediately a then get announced here. That's lazy policy. Now, for some people, people who work in my office carry around everywhere. They don't work from anywhere. They work from everywhere. But for some people, particularly for women, it's a gendered issue as well. It can be entirely appropriate to work from home, to work online. People can get just as much done. It depends on the nature of the work. Now, I get people wanting to work from the office because you get that social interaction is really important as well. But the idea that you're just going to stipulate, and that's before you get to Peter Dutton saying that 36,000 Australians will be sacked from their jobs. There's services that people get provided in Centrelink, in the NDIS, in healthcare, in Veterans Affairs, and they're not in Canberra. They're in every suburb and every town and every city of Australia. Canberra's some, but overwhelmingly they're out there providing services for people. It's lazy policy.
It really does sound like, excuse me for interrupting, we're in campaign mode. So are you sure you don't just want to announce it right now and we'll get this show on the road?
It's...
just pull the trigger, PM.
Pull the trigger this afternoon. Don't go to Brisbane, go to Canberra instead, you reckon. Yeah. See the Governor-General.
Yeah. Well, we have taken a great deal of your time during a very busy day and we really appreciate you sharing some of it with us. Prime Minister, thanks for joining us.
Thanks very much, Sylvia. We'll have to it's been a while between meals, but we'll have to do that too.
No point inviting Carl and Dickie. We'll leave them out of it.
No, we'll invite Pete and Jody
much
instead.
Much better, much more interesting. Thanks so much for your time.
Ciao.